All right, so I don't know where this is going to go, but today we're talking about, do you need equipment for a podcast? And
Yes,
that's
no. Yeah, it could go
okay.
either way, honestly.
Yeah, let's talk about it because this came from yesterday. We were scoping out a client's project.
Yeah,
We try to keep things, within a certain frame. And what's happened over the years is that we've gotten more and more technology that enables us to fix things
yeah.
if we need to fix things. But we also know that it's better to start with good quality audio and video and not have to fix things.
Absolutely,
So,
'cause go ahead.
yeah, well, that's what we have to figure out. Right now, as an agency, we're working with our clients, and we know sometimes people see the output and don't know how much fixing was done to get to that, and they believe that what they see on the output was how it was actually made.
And it's not just the actual effort that's gone to it, or the time that was invested to fix that, which may have been several different layers, several different steps to get to that point. You have to do this with the image, then you do this to the image in another software, then you do this to the audio, then you sync them up and you do all these things and sweeten the audio and master it, and then it comes out the other side. And the thing is, a lot of our clients and guests on podcasts, for example, they don't know that's how they didn't sound or look in the recording. They're only in their own environment. They don't know how the that the capability of the microphone or webcam or room environment that they came to the table with wasn't ideal, because for them, everyone's always heard them. Everyone's always understood them. They've had their Zoom calls. There isn't a deficit in their mind. From our mind, what's happening, at least in some circumstances, is, let's say the host of the podcast has a nice microphone, and they've got an earpiece to hear, and they sound great. They look great. Yeah, there you go. But the guest comes to the table and they're just, come as you are. We don't want the guest to sound at such a deficit to compared to the host, because the host is so good, it makes the guest sound less professional, more difficult to hear. It's more difficult. It's a lot more work for the listener or the viewer to process that difference. But it also, you want the guest to sound great, so they wanna share that content out there and be proud of their appearance, and you want your client, the host in this case, to also be happy with the production value that you deliver to them. So you have to do the work on the back end as producers, as editors, in order to, sort of equalize, as much as you can, those 2 things. So but
Well,
I don't think
here's the
going in,
hard
people
part for me.
realize that.
Yeah, that the realized part. That's where I wanted to go. This is the part that it's a pleasure and also a frustration. I'll give you an example. Let's say I've seen you edit podcasts, for example, and I see the end result. Somebody shows up with earpods, Apple earpods in, or AirPods, right? And the host, our client, has like, $300-400 microphone like this, a podcast microphone, which I'm not using right now. Um, they'll have that, and then the end result, the person with the AirPods sounds as good as a person with that expensive microphone. This is where my frustration comes in, is where another potential client sees that video and goes, wow, they sound really good. I don't need a podcast microphone. I can show up with AirPods. They don't understand that post production made those two sound close to the same. They don't understand that, a few minutes in, you might have lost a letter on the end of some word because there was compression happening with the AirPods. Those little things make a difference, but it's difficult for us as an agency to explain. You don't want to show up with us with a lot of work to be done,
Yeah.
as opposed to showing up sounding good, looking good in the first place.
And you talk about, I don't wanna get too into the granular here, but I think this is an important point. You talked about the AirPods and clipping the end of a word or whatever. Let me explain for those that may not realize. We can only work as editors, as producers, with the amount of information that the recording process has actually captured. If you whatever your equipment is, if it's AirPods, it's designed to capture a certain amount of actual information that comes into the microphone or whatever. Then that microphone processes what comes in and has a certain amount of data, and the way it captures the data, that is about the typical use for that piece of equipment. So that piece of equipment's typical use might be more about the listening than the talking. It might be about
Mm.
masking the background noise, and so it processes sound a certain way, and therefore, the information that's captured, the recording that's captured, may not have as much data in all the places data can be captured. The recording itself may itself naturally have the ends of words kind of clipped off as it goes to mask the background sound and goes too fast. So because of that, when we go to work on that recording and make it better and improve it and heal it and all the things you
Heal it, yeah.
do, we can only I can only frost a cake. Once the cake's made, the cake's gonna taste the way it's gonna taste. I can put beautiful frosting on it, but it still tastes like the cake tastes,
Let me give an
and
example of what you're talking about because this is one of the examples I hear with two things you mentioned. One, AirPods are designed to do a lot of things, like you said, noise cancellation, listen, record the microphone, put sound into your ear, all these things. It isn't just a microphone and it's not designed to be an amazing microphone. It's a communication device. So that's one thing. Then you mentioned some of the compression and things. To give in layman's terms, imagine if I'm recording the word fast. At the end of the word fast is a S and a T. Those could be quieter than the F and the A, fast. So if this device, my earbud or AirPod or whatever, is not designed to capture those nuances, in the recording you may just hear fa or fa. You don't
'cause
hear the
it doesn't
quiet parts.
exist. It doesn't exist on the recording.
Right. And then when you try to fix it, there's nothing to fix. The sound literally isn't there. So that leads me to my next thing I want to talk about is all the new features that our favorite software have plugged in to make it DIY in producing a podcast. Because that's one of the things we found that if you show up with everything perfect, like a high end microphone, a nice sound treated room, you can produce a podcast maybe beginning to end without extra features, without going outside of some of these platforms. But nobody has that kind of, very few people have that kind of environment that's that clean, right? So, given what you said a moment ago about the software, suppose you have AirPods or some unideal microphone that isn't picking up all the information you need, and then you throw in all the AI software built in, it won't make it better because it wasn't captured. And you can't, to use a phrase, I don't know, I won't get
Mhm.
censored for this, you can't polish a turd, so to speak. I mean, if it's not there,
Right.
you can't
Garbage
fix
in,
it.
garbage out, they say, right?
Garbage in, garbage
And
out. Yeah. Have you ever thought about doing a podcast for your business? And if you have, you probably have some questions. And we understand that because podcasting isn't for every business. That's why we've created a tool called podcastornot.com. If you go to podcastornot.com, you can take a quiz that gives you a full assessment of the strengths and weaknesses you may have in terms of if you're ready to start a podcast and how it can benefit your business. Now, we know podcasts are a great marketing tool and a great source of content for all businesses, but maybe you're not there yet. So take this assessment at podcastornot.com. We'll give you a full report that you can share with your team about are you ready and is a podcast a fit for your business. So go to podcastornot.com, take the quick quiz, and get a full assessment of should you start a podcast for your business. Back to the content.
now here's where this comes to the question of, do you need equipment or don't you need equipment? Because a lot of it has to do with where is your priority.
Yeah.
So if your priority is ideal production value, you're a brand, for example, that spends an unbelievable amount of money to make sure that color, exact color is everywhere your brand is. You have put unbelievable amount of money into your website. You pay attention to every little nuance of brand. Everything is perfect. There is no reason why when you produce a podcast that's representing your brand, you don't wanna start from the most ideal, starting position. And in a podcast, one of those pieces, other than the actual format and structure and what you're gonna do with it as content, from a production value, it's let's make sure that when you record, as I talked about data points, we have as much data to work with. We have as the cake is baked as good as it can be before we frost it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe that isn't your priority. Maybe your priority is, I'm a busy executive. I want to just step into this thing. I don't want to deal with equipment and plugging in and this and that. I want to go in and have my conversation because that's what matters to me. And if you guys at Content Monsta can polish that a little bit, make it seem a little bit better, so that it's as professional looking and sounding as possible, the conversation still happened. Now we don't have to worry about that, and that puts the focus where it needs to be for that particular client. And I think the message for us, in my head, is let's focus on what the most important thing for the client is, and that may not be that they need all sorts of equipment to get started.
Yeah, I think there's also something to say about where they're coming from. In other words, we've seen clients who came from trying to record Zoom meetings and call them podcasts, and it's easy to lift way above that with some of the technology built into our software that's already there. And if you're DIYing it in your company, yeah, you can upgrade from that from a Zoom recording in the box in some softwares. But if you're competing with other podcasts with higher quality, then you may want to start the other end and figure out where you can fit in terms of having professional help that's available to fix things that you didn't even know you had problems with.
So what do you think are some of the considerations that maybe people that either don't have the budget or it's not they wanted, no fuss, no mess recording, and they just want to step to the table and have their conversations. What are some of the things that they can think about that will help them figure out that decision?
Okay.
And how they maybe can manage without equipment to be in the best possible starting point with us once that recording reaches our post-production.
Well, let's talk about equipment a little bit here in terms of I think there's some things that people need to understand about the purpose of some things that we do
Yep,
behind the scenes.
yep. Hold on one
I'll
second,
start with
Lee. Hold
mhm.
on one second. Just one second, please. I'm sorry, I had to control the room environment a little bit.
Maybe we'll keep that in because that's where I was going.
Oh, okay. So
Okay, leave that
someone in
in.
my environment was just clinking around something, and I wanted
Okay.
them to stop because I wanted to control the environment.
Right. Now think about this. Here's a few things going on behind the scenes in this recording. Mark isn't wearing headphones. He's
Yep.
got a great microphone, but he's not wearing headphones. Do you have echo cancellation turned on or no?
I do, I have echo cancellation turned on
Right.
right
So
now.
there's no echo, but there's also background room. That could maybe be fixed in post or depending on the microphone. So that's where I was going. Right
And I
now,
wanna point out that by having echo cancellation on, I'm already, we'll call it, infecting the recording with a slight loss in quality, but I
that's right.
chose to do that knowing, 1, how I could repair it on the back end with post-production, and 2, because I didn't wanna be seen with big headphones on my head, so I
Right.
made a decision that was about the message versus the quality of the recording.
That's an important decision. Plus, you have the luxury of being an editor, so you can fix it if it happened. So you don't have you have a hired editor who can fix these things. So we know, and we've taken notes as to what's going on. So in that scenario, I want to mention that right now I'm using a microphone that I use for video, which is above the camera here. I'm not using my podcast microphone, but that's with a certain level of understanding. One, the room that I'm in is somewhat sound treated.
Mhm.
So if it wasn't this microphone, which is a $50 microphone, if it wasn't in a treated room, there'd be echoes bouncing off the wall. It would sound much worse. It'd be harder to fix. You'd hear things in the next room. However, I'm going to switch over to this microphone. All right, you can hear me now, right? This
Mhm.
microphone is designed to be closer to me. There should be
Has
a slight
presence, has presence.
has presence. Also, it doesn't hear as much of what's going on in the background. So even if
Right.
this room was not treated, you wouldn't hear that much of it. This is one you see, it's the most popular like podcast mic because people may be in the room with the
Sure.
podcaster or the radio person or whatever. So it's designed to only pick up right here. That's another technical in the weeds thing, but it matters. Now, I'm also wearing an earbud because I don't have echo cancellation turned on, and if I did not have that turned on, then when Mark spoke, it would come out of my speakers. It would, well, that's a different thing. Let me get to the monitor. Echo cancellation is not turned on because it's not going to mess with my voice at all. It's going to get every sound, if I say fast, the T will definitely get in this microphone. It's very sensitive to this space. The other thing is I have an earbud in because I don't have any speakers in the room playing. If the speakers in the room were on, Mark's voice would come out into the room and into this microphone, and out into the room, into the microphone. That's a loop. It would echo. But with the earbud in, the sound goes into the microphone to Mark. Mark speaks into my ear, and this ear doesn't go back into the microphone. This sound doesn't connect. So all these little things matter. And as Mark said a moment ago, whenever you start introducing software in your recording process, like echo cancellation and noise reduction and all these things, and cheap microphones and no headphones, you start eating into the quality of your original recording.
There is another part of this we're not talking about, and what you're talking about is, sort of the industrial post-production process and the technical parts of it we have to think about to deliver the best possible result for our client, or for anyone producing a podcast. This is what they need to think about. But I think there's another part of this, Lee, and that is the listener or the viewer and the experience as they take in content that they now come to expect that
Yeah.
speaks to them what quote quality unquote sounds like. Now, here's the thing. If Lee has something compelling and valuable for you as a professional to talk about, and Lee doesn't have that microphone, Lee doesn't have this nice background, he just talks and you can hear him. There's a little bit of echo, but you can understand him and hear him fine. That should be sufficient for you as a person taking in that content because you're getting the information you want anyway.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we have come to expect when you go to the movies, you expect the movie to have a certain level of quality. The story isn't enough. You want a shot and sound a certain way because that's what you come to expect is delivered to your doorstep in quality. Now we subconsciously expect this. If I'm away from my microphone like this versus close like this, it changes my perspective as a listener of what is happening, what's the quality. When we listen to the radio, we've always listened to radio announcers that sound right on the microphone like this. So we want to hear stuff like that. So we, as content creators, have to think about, do we need to give the listener what they're expecting so they don't pay attention to the production value, they pay attention to the content instead?
Hey, marketers, imagine harnessing the power of conversations to elevate your brand's authority and visibility. With Content Monsta's podcast production services, you create a platform to connect with executives and subject matter experts, fostering relationships that position your brand as a thought leader. Our expert team collaborates with you to craft engaging podcasts, which can be repurposed into videos and social media content, maximizing your reach across platforms. Don't let content creation challenges hold you back. Partner with Content Monsta to transform your marketing strategy and reach more customers. Visit contentmonsta.com today to get started. I want to break into that thought, purposely interrupting you, because we need to clarify to anybody watching this that there's a difference between audio and video. And the important
True.
part is we will watch a video that has poor video longer if it has good audio. If the audio is horrible, we won't watch the video. And here's the interesting part. The average person doesn't know why they don't want to watch it. They just know that it's not as interesting as the one that's clear. There've been studies, a few studies. One that I quote a lot is there's two of them I love, where during the pandemic they did some tests in a court situation, and the people who were giving their testimonials over Zoom or over audio only, who weren't there, those who had high quality audio were perceived as more authoritative and more believable as witnesses. And those who had poor audio were less believable and less trustworthy. Same thing with, they did some lectures And the lecturers who had high audio quality were seen as smarter, more intellectual, more believable, more trustworthy than those who had poor quality. Now, given that and what you said, it's a matter of what the content is you're conveying.
Mhm.
And getting back to our do you need equipment or not depends on your audience, depends on the psychology. We know that good audio does matter better. And we can't deny that software has come a long way. Even what we use on the back end for post production, even that software has improved. So there is a larger DIY possibility for you to get something decent DIY in software until you run into an issue that you have to fix. And then, like you said earlier, there's nothing there, there's no data there to fix. So we're not against any kind of DIY. And we have lots of clients who have gone the DIY route and hit a wall and then come to us for the professional touch. Um, and so there's something to be said about do you need equipment or not? As usual, it depends. If you want to reach a certain standard that's just communicating and you're not competing against someone else with higher quality, maybe you don't need equipment. If you have the understanding to fix things in post production, that's where we come in. Even for our clients, we try to start them with high quality to ease the post production and give us options if we have to fix something. If we start lower, and in some cases, we may say, look, this executive is not going to plug anything in. We may have to just say, look, give them a lower
Sure.
quality, a faster kit, a smaller piece of equipment, lower barrier to entry. And then we know there's going to be some back end work to make up for that.
I'm reflecting on a client that we had worked in the past in the past, who it became an albatross for him trying to put himself in an environment that he perceived was necessary to move forward with the recording. And the truth was it wasn't. It wasn't important enough for him to be in that special environment with special equipment, and it prevented him from recording the content, having the conversations he needed to have that, and motivated him to have the podcast in the first place. And the truth was is it just wasn't there wasn't enough value in what the equipment brought if he didn't get it done. If it prevents you from getting it done, if it demotivates your executive, if it keeps you from being able to be in the place you need to be, if it keeps you from recording, whatever it is, then don't worry about the equipment. We'll do what we can to fix it. At least the conversations exist. At least the content exists. But if you're in a position to start from a position of strength in terms of the quality of the recordings that we start with, that's awesome, and if you are comfortable maintaining that, then it certainly puts everybody in a much better position, and then we can focus more on the conversations rather than how we can always try to fix it on the back end.
I think I know the scenario you're talking about, and I think it's really important to talk about for those who are thinking about going out and spending on equipment. What we're talking about when we say equipment or not, in that scenario, the equipment that he thought he needed was a studio, a high-end microphone, a certain location. That environment he was in was worth thousands, plus his time to go to that location. Turns out the equipment he really needed, and he did need equipment, was more like hundreds, maybe $300 or $400 worth of equipment
And then
to
he could
make him
record
sound
right from his own office.
right. And the quality was still very high. And this is maybe an answer to do you need equipment or not? It's not just yes or no, it's do you understand what you really need? Like, no, he did not need a studio to get the quality he needed. Yes, he did need some equipment, but it was very inexpensive and worked out great. And they were able to start and deliver for a few $100 instead of trying to be perfect in a studio, spending more money and never delivering.
And, when Content Monsta started, this may not necessarily have been the paradigm because some of these tools, these software tools and so forth, just didn't exist yet, or they weren't perfected enough to be useful enough to be dependable. Now we see such a rapid change of the kinds of tools that we can deploy, And that's part of our job is to keep tabs and understand them and test them and know which ones are best. And it isn't just like, okay, contact Monster, go use this AI tool. It's not as simple as that. We come to the table already knowing which ones are going to work and how to use them. But because that's possible, we are shifting our own paradigm very quickly about where equipment must be used and where it's necessary versus where it may actually become an impediment to success.
And in every case, we have to consider the human element, right? We
Yeah,
know all the technical stuff, but we have to figure, will this executive use this? Is it easy to plug in? Can they move around? This person's always in a different hotel location. Will this work for them as they move around? And in the
yeah,
end, will it allow this show, this marketing team to actually create the content and convey the message they want to? Can they actually get it done as opposed to trying to go overboard with thinking about equipment?
absolutely.